Michigan State University's Office of K-12 Outreach, bringing research, innovation, and best practices to educators across Michigan, the United States, and the world.
I'm Shirley Jackson, an outreach specialist in the Office of K-12 Outreach in the College of Education at Michigan State University, where Dr. Brian Beverly is our amazing and intrepid leader. I'm back with another segment of our office's focus on International Women's History Month, which we view as an opportunity to celebrate women who've made enormous contributions to the world in general, but especially here in Michigan. So over the course of 2022, our office will introduce you to incredible women who've chosen careers in education. Impressive in so many ways, these super women influence our thinking about education and seem to exude the matchless ability to interact with systems that have the power to create or dismantle our chances at full participation in society. Importantly, though, women like today's guests challenge our thinking about the ways in which policy and practice intersect to create the context within which learning takes place. So without further delay, I'll introduce the impressive and the relentless advocate for adolescent literacy, Dr. Sharon Russell, an assistant professor of literacy at Ashland University in Ashland, Ohio. Sharon still resides in Michigan, and long before Ashland hired her away, she created the Adolescent Critical Reading Intervention known as ACRI. That intervention is used in Oakland County schools still under a slightly different name. Nonetheless, it uses the methods pioneered by Dr. Russell and is just as successful in supporting struggling readers. Sharon, welcome and thank you for agreeing to come and talk with me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I don't want to waste a minute of your time. I know your schedule is busy, so let's get started. Tell us just a little about your educational and career journey.
Well, it has been different from the norm. I started out in my younger days as an dual certification in elementary and early childhood education from Millersville University in Pennsylvania. I taught in Harrisburg City Schools for a couple of years. And then I taught first grade in Newville, which is a very rural school.
Okay, so you're not a Michigan native.
I am not. Those are both in Pennsylvania. Apologies. Okay. I left teaching for a while, but then went back to Penn State for my master's as a K-12 certified reading specialist. Caught what we call the literacy bug. And went from Penn State to the University of Maryland to work on my PhD. I spent 6 years there doing all kinds of things, but my own PhD work with adolescent literacy is the work that ultimately became Adolescent Critical Reading Intervention, which we are actually now using statewide.
Okay. Wow, that's impressive. And because I know a little bit about ACRI, I'm really happy to hear that. We're going to come back to that, I'm sure, a little bit later in this interview, but I'm just wondering, this is an interview that really is about women. And one of the aims of these interviews is to remind people of the impact that women have in our state and around the world. So I'm wondering, What are your hopes and aspirations for that impact that women will make in the coming years?
That is a difficult question. I think there are a lot of things tied to that.
Mm-hmm.
My ultimate hope is that all women, regardless of race, background, socioeconomic status, will have an equal yet different impact than men.
Goes without saying that whatever impact women make, it probably will be different than the one made by men. I think you're going to get your wish in that way. Who would you say were the most influential women in your career?
Well, I would have to point to my mother first. She was a pioneer in her own right. She taught first grade, went back for a master's degree, and was one of the first second language ESL teachers in the country.
Wow.
With the first wave of Cambodian and Laotian refugees way back in the early 70s. So it seems that she may have had a typical career, except that it wasn't. And she went into the pastorate second career at a time when it was not kosher to go into the pastorate as a woman.
So when you say pastorate, you're talking about religion.
Yes, she was a Methodist preacher.
Okay. That's quite interesting. But it's not so far removed from what she was. She was a public servant. She was a person who saw herself that way, it sounds like.
Yes. And what I realized, she did see herself very much that way. She also thought about mission work. But what I realized, unfortunately, not until after her death, was that she was such a pioneer and she showed me exactly how to do it.
Wow.
There are reasons that I am doing what I'm doing, that I'm sitting where I'm sitting. There are reasons that I don't have a family, although she would have loved grandchildren. She just was very much a trailblazer.
Wow, as are you. So are there other women that you feel were impactful where your career is concerned?
Absolutely. My dissertation advisor and very good friend, Dr. Marilyn Chambliss, whose text structure model I use, really at the University of Maryland helped me orchestrate my career. She also taught me how I wanted to mentor students in higher ed, because not everyone does it the same way. And there have been many other women, Laura Schiller in particular in Oakland County before she retired, helped get what we now call ACRI off the ground. We ran a replication research study because she found out about my PhD work and wanted to try it in Oakland County. And from there, it kind of took off and I went into that full time. And around the state, many other women, including yourself, in our work in Flint and Detroit, and your dedication and helping me to figure out cultural communities in both places. Also, Erin Brown out in Muskegon, who still works with Mesa. So there have been many women.
Wow. That's amazing, Sharon. And thank you for those kind comments. I appreciate it. I wonder, you have to have had many many proud moments in your career. You've achieved a lot. What do you think, or would you say is your proudest career achievement to date?
That's an interesting question. I have been thinking about it, and I'm truly not sure there actually are two.
Let's hear about them, because I'm interested.
My PhD work was the best 5 years of my life, and finishing that PhD, I wanted an existence proof, and I got it. I wanted to know that we did not have to throw away teenagers because they were not reading. And that experience was just wonderful. My whole experience at Maryland was just wonderful. And it really launched the other thing, which is powerful for me. And that is the impact that ACRI has had statewide. Teachers still call me and say, it's like Christmas. I didn't believe you, but I just got these QRI scores back. And kids have written letters that they're now doing things that they want to do, that they can go on and be successful. And so I can go to my grave knowing that I've made an impact. And the other place is professional development for teachers.
Oh, okay. Say a little about that.
When I started, it was all about adolescent struggling readers. But the more I got into it, the more I realized how much working with teachers was such a blessing, because part of what I believe the ACRI professional development does is empower them. I think that they feel, and that I believe that that is my job with the ACRI professional development, to empower teachers to understand the literacy process and to be able to go back and use it in a way that teachers are very not empowered today. That's a poor sentence.
That is, that's quite interesting to hear you say how empowered people are feeling by knowing how the literacy process works in education. You know, we now have something called the Literacy Essentials here in Michigan. What do you see as the connection between those essentials, those literacy essentials, and the work you do through ACRI? Is there a connection?
I am very concerned about what is being touted as the science of reading. I believe wholeheartedly that foundational skills are critical. Mm-hmm. I am also incredibly concerned that regardless of what the essentials say, regardless of what Common Core standards say, we are shortchanging comprehension in both fiction and in nonfiction. And what we know about literacy development and early literacy theory is that the communication arts develop together.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean when you say the communication arts develop together. Are you saying that speaking, writing, and reading are interrelated, and that we may not be spending as much time helping students understand that?
Yes, reading, writing, speaking, listening. Mari Clay's work in the 60s highlighted the fact that all of those skills develop together from infancy. that you can see the interplay in those skills as infants and young children develop. So by leaving out the comprehension piece, I fear that we are creating a cognitive gap. And I think that's part of what we are seeing in upper elementary and secondary.
Sharon, it sounds as if you are hinting at the possibility that we may not be addressing comprehension skills early enough. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I believe that teachers think they're addressing them, but they always get put on the back burner for word identification, phonics, fluency. All of those things are important, but they absolutely need to be tied to the process of making meaning. And I think there needs to be a greater focus on that. I also believe that we make assumptions as teachers that are not necessarily always accurate. So for example, oral reading fluency does not automatically translate into comprehension. Listening comprehension is a very different skill from reading comprehension. So is it important? Yes, it is. Is it enough? Probably not. One of the terms that we used to use in literacy, and I haven't heard it in a while, is necessary but not sufficient.
That's all really interesting, and I'm wondering if what you are raising as concerns in our teaching of literacy are borne out in the low reading scores overall that we see in our state. It almost feels as if they're the way we teach reading may be contributing to our lack of achievement, I guess is the only way to put it, Sharon, for older children.
I think there are multiple contributing factors. I think actually we've sort of created a perfect storm. And it is not just that we're focusing on foundational skills K1, 2. Often those are not tied to real text. However, we also teach reading in the narrative, in fiction. And we do not help students with nonfiction comprehension skills.
So how different are the skills for reading narrative and expository text? Are they that different?
Yes, they are very different. And Jerome Bruner taught us years ago that we live in the narrative. Narrative is innate, and we innately understand it. Dinner table conversations, when you're telling a story of a day, is narrative. But to have the cognitive, critical thinking and inferential skills to handle something like the process of osmosis from a biology book is a very, very different set of skills. Authors write for different purposes, for different audiences. That writing is organized very differently. So not only do I need content knowledge, which is what we're all pushing, I also need text negotiation skills. I need to make inferences between maps and charts and the body of the text. I need to make inferences about whether headings are helping my comprehension or hurting my comprehension. I have to have understanding of specific things that happen in particular genres. For example, in chemistry, in cause and effect, often the author's claim or argument comes at the end of paragraphs and not at the beginning. So there are all of these, because there's a causal chain. All of these things are things that are not happening in the elementary curriculum. And in fact, that is one of the reasons I went back to higher ed.
Okay.
I did not necessarily see a place for myself in higher ed for a long time because my passion is adolescent literacy, and most of that revolves around comprehension. We created, with No Child Left Behind, what I call a nation of word callers. But
it just sounds, I just want to jump in for a minute just to say that it sounds as if there's a real disconnect between our emphasis on narrative instruction for narrative text and the reality of what kids face in school, which is lots of content delivered through expository text.
And much of that text is very poorly written. High school textbooks are some of the worst written. American textbooks are some of the worst written textbooks in the world.
So are you saying they're poorly written because you disagree with what they are saying, or is it?
Oh, no. They are structured poorly. They are incoherent. They are not friendly to readers and learners. Nobody in any profession gets any kind of kudos or tenure for writing a textbook.
So you're reminding us that aside from the fact that kids come to high school with very few skills for addressing expository text, the text itself is very difficult to read, even for those people who have some skills.
Yes, and then we disservice kids by delivering the curriculum orally and putting it all in PowerPoints. And then they get to college and they fail out.
Wow. You're giving me such a lesson on literacy, and you are really speaking in ways that you rarely hear when people talk about teaching reading to students. We could have this conversation for hours, I'm sure, but unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, and we have gone on for quite a while just helping people understand the work that you've done for the bulk of your career. I'm so happy that you've done it. I'm just wondering, though, you've been successful in creating an intervention for adolescent readers, and you've had many other successes too. You've written. What are the factors that have contributed most to your success?
I think grit is one of them. Stick-to-itiveness. But along with that, truly, some things were providence, like my spending 3 years on a grant at the University of Michigan where I met Laura Schiller. The networking that goes on professionally, but also passion. So passion and grit together are what make it happen. My focus changes, but I never lose focus. I'm passionate about this whole adolescent literacy thing. I love teenagers, which if you had told me that when I was 25, I would have laughed in your face. As a population, society marginalizes them. Everybody's like, isn't that awful? Well, no, we all went through it. We were all teenagers once. I rolled my eyeballs and flipped my hair. I skipped school. On top of that, when you start adding risk factors, socioeconomic status, race, gender, urban schools, rural schools, the things that we talk about, second language, the things we talk about all the time. When you add that onto adolescence and onto what they face in the classroom, which we've already talked about, we are not helping them. We are creating a perfect storm to repeat cycles of failure.
Wow.
And they deserve better. And mostly these kids are bright, capable.
So you mentioned three things: hard work, passion. You mentioned something else that has left my mind, but I really focused on that whole notion that we have to have some grit, some ability to stick to things and to work hard to get them done as factors that contributed to your success. Well, even if you have that, it seems that there's still challenges. What would you say to young women who are entering our field now during this time when there are so many roadblocks seemingly in their way, low pay not being the only thing?
I've thought about this question too, and that is also a very difficult one for me, but I think that if you are sure that education is what you want to do, then go do it. And don't listen to anybody who tells you differently. I had a high school teacher told me I might want to do more with my career than be a teacher. Wow. And you know what that made me do? It made me dig in my heels. Oh, no, you don't. Oh, no, you don't get to tell me.
Well, I just think when I hear you say that, all I can think is, wow, if you had listened to her, we wouldn't have ACRI. We wouldn't have your amazing perspective on how we can help struggling adolescent readers become more proficient and more successful.
It was a him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I looked at him, who has 6 children, and said, who do you want teaching your children?
I bet you were a fireball.
Sometimes, yes.
I'm thinking about challenges for women, and you've raised one. So what do you feel is the most significant challenge women face today? You talked about this person really trying to deter you from what has become your life's work. What are the most significant challenges that women are facing today?
Oh, I think there are a number. I think one of them is cultural inequity, and it is implicit. And I know that gets also caught up in other variables. But one of the things that I have had to learn to do in my career is put on a suit with a power handkerchief in my pocket and play hardball with the big boys. But I am always, less so now, but I was always feeling like I had to prove myself in a culture that wants to leave women in what my brother and I, who is a nurse, call the basement professions, nursing and teaching. And so why do those professions not get the accolades they should, or the support they should, or the finances that they should? It's an excellent question. Is it because they are classically female professions? And we could take that way back to the first normal school in the country.
We certainly could.
Which is
and many women have raised that as a possibility. Others have said it absolutely is the reason that career paths, such as those for nursing and teaching, have gotten such short shrift. So there may be something there, Sharon. There may be something there.
I'm sorry. I also think there's another cultural piece to that. And that is, it's what we're expected to do. And we can go out and be professionals as long as we can still raise the kids and still make the dinner and still put slippers beside the chair at 6 o'clock. No. But those professions align with that cultural expectation of caretaking. And for some reason, it's looked down upon.
Okay.
Okay, so that was my...
That also I've thought about the fact that women have always been expected to take care of everyone, the children, the elderly, their husbands, their families. And many people have not considered that work worth paying for. So,
yeah, exactly.
Very sad. Well, Dr. Sharon Russell, you've given us a lot to think about, particularly where literacy is concerned. And I'm hoping that you will stay on the battlefield to help us figure out ways to not have to have children reach 6th, 7th, and 8th grades without the skills they need to lay the groundwork for future education, for further education. You spoke, this is the last question I think we have time for, and I'm going back to your having mentioned mentoring young women. How have you done that?
I think in some ways in my work with teachers, and especially through ACRI, being able to connect with young teachers in the field, and when they call me and when we, I have brutally honest chats with them about what they are up against. Mm-hmm. One of the things that an advantage that I have is that I actually visit their schools. I know what's going on in their buildings and in their districts, but also in higher education. It is very important to me to see colleagues, and in particular, female colleagues, succeed. I have mentored other folks through the PhD program, and I'm actually doing that right now at Ashland in some other ways. And having been through it, it is really important for me to help others get through it.
So happy to hear you say that, Dr. Russell. I certainly hope that you are doing everything you can to produce the next generation of Sharon Russells, because it sounds like we still have a lot of work to do, particularly in the area of literacy, adolescent literacy in particular. I want to thank you so much for having taken the time to come in and speak with me today. It's been an amazing journey through your career, and I loved hearing about your enthusiasm and, yes, your passion for literacy. I hope that we'll have an opportunity to talk again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.